When I picked up the phone to ask my son, Daniel, 30, what time the wedding would be, his fiancée, Ava, 28, looked me straight in the eye and gave me a cold smile. "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words hit me like a bucket of cold water. Special people? Me, Patricia, 62, living in Seattle. The one who paid their rent for 3 years, who bought every piece of furniture for their apartment, who filled their fridge when they had nothing to eat, was not a special person. I stood frozen in my own living room, holding the phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Daniel avoided my gaze while Ava lounged on the sofa I had bought them. The pink dress I had chosen for their wedding still hung useless in the closet, next to the new shoes. And the fantasy that I would be part of the most important day in my only son's life. I had spent $600 on that dress, imagining I would smile in Daniel's wedding photos, photos in which I would never appear. For weeks I had planned every detail. I had set aside $3,000 as a wedding gift. I called my sister Elena, 58, in Chicago, to share the good news. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, thinking maybe they would come over to celebrate after the ceremony. Everything collapsed in a second, with those 4 poisonous words. Only special people. Finally, Daniel looked up, his voice sounding rehearsed. "Mom, it was just a small, intimate thing. Just the 2 of us and a few witnesses." But I knew that was a lie. I later saw the photos on social media. Ava's parents proudly posing beside the bride and groom, her siblings clinking champagne glasses. I saw Ava's white dress, the dress I had contributed $300 toward for her personal expenses last month. I saw everything except the moment I wasn't invited to witness. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Ava called back in a completely different voice. No longer the confident woman who had excluded me from the wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Patricia, the rent is late. The landlord is on our case. If we don't pay this week, they'll evict us. You forgot to send the transfer." Her voice trembled, as if the world were collapsing on her. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had rushed to the bank, all the times I'd canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads, all the times I ate frugally so I could send money for their needs. And now, after shutting me out of the most important moment of their lives, they had the nerve to call like nothing had happened. I answered with a calm that surprised even me. "Ava, didn't I tell you? I only help special people." The silence on the other end was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, the one who trembled was not me, but her. "Patricia, I don't understand. We are special to you. You're like a second mother to me." Lies. All lies wrapped in the sweet voice she uses only when she needs something. That same voice had asked me for money for her wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings I helped finance, never knowing I would never see them exchange those rings. For years I walked on eggshells, measuring every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the accommodating mother-in-law, the silent provider, never protesting when I was treated like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had been asleep for a long time. I began to calculate how much I had spent on them over 3 years. Rent, food, gifts, emergencies, indulgences. More than $60,000. That was money I had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the portion my late husband left so I could live comfortably in my later years. And all for what? To be treated like a stranger at my son's wedding. That night, after I hung up, I sat on my bed and cried. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of anger, of frustration accumulated over years of swallowed humiliations. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, that my presence was an annoyance, that my money was the only valuable thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, the woman who lost herself, trying to be indispensable to people who saw her as disposable. The next morning, something had changed in me. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes, the same age lines, yet there was something different in my gaze. A hardness I didn't recognize. A resolve that had been buried under years of acquiescence. I made coffee like I've done for 40 years, but this time, I didn't think about calling Daniel to ask if he'd gotten up. I didn't look at my phone waiting for an apologetic message. For the first time in a very long time, the first thing on my mind in the morning was me. I sat down at the same table where I had written budget lists for them, planned surprises for them, and silently cried over their indifference. Now, that table would witness something different. I pulled out my checkbook, my bank statements, opened my laptop, and began calculating. I wanted to see the exact number behind my foolishness. Rent. $1,800 per month times 36 months equals $64,800. Food and essentials. $300 per month times 36 months equals $10,800. Birthday divided by Christmas divided by anniversary gifts, about $2,500. Minor medical emergencies. $1,200. Loan for their car. Never repaid. $3,500. Fixing their apartment's AC. $250. Sofa and TV stand. $1,900. Total. $84,950. That was the price of blind generosity. The money I had drained from my retirement, my savings, the inheritance my late husband left me poured into a bottomless pit to support two adults who didn't even bother pretending to respect me. I set the pen down. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I would do next. The phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen. Normally, I would rush to answer, heart racing, hoping he would finally apologize, that it was all just a misunderstanding. But this time, I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times, and declined. I kept sipping my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was Ava. I let it ring too. Then Daniel texted, "Mom, please pick up. We need to talk. It's urgent." I deleted the message without replying. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. It had been months since I walked, simply because I wanted to. Before, every outing revolved around them. Going to the bank to transfer money, stopping by the grocery store for Ava, running to the pharmacy for Daniel. Today, I walked for no other reason than because I wanted to. I passed the park where I used to take Daniel when he was little. I remembered that sweet boy hugging me tightly and whispering that I was the best mom in the world. When did my son turn into a man who saw his mother only as an emotional ATM? When did I start confusing love with money, believing I had to buy my only child's affection? Outside the bank, where I had set up so many automatic transfers for them, I stopped. Charles Rivera, the bank manager, saw me through the glass and waved. He had known me for years, handling every transaction I sent to Daniel and Ava, watching my account drain away to fill theirs. I walked straight into his office. "Mr. Charles," I said, "I need to cancel all automatic transfers." He looked at me, surprised. For 3 years, those payments had been as predictable as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Patricia? Did something happen?" His concern was more genuine than any I'd heard from Daniel in months. At last, I had opened my eyes. I answered, "I want everything canceled, and I want to know how to protect my account. No one else touches my money ever again." While he processed the cancellations, my phone rang nonstop. "Daniel, then Ava, then Daniel again. As if they had radar, sensing the moment their income stream was cut off, I powered the phone down completely. "Mrs. Patricia," Charles said as he handed me the papers. "Forgive me for intruding, but I've seen you be very generous with your family over the years. I hope they didn't pressure you into this." His words stung my eyes with tears. This man, who only knew me through transactions, cared more sincerely than my own son. "They didn't pressure me, Mr. Charles," I said with a sad smile. "On the contrary, I finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt an unfamiliar lightness, as if I had left a heavy burden behind those doors. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I no longer owed anything to people who saw me only as a resource, not a human being." On the way home, I thought about everything I had sacrificed to please Daniel and Ava. The trips I never took so I could save for them. The friends I drifted from because I was always available for their emergencies. The hobbies I abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself felt like one less for them. When I got home, I saw 3 cars parked out front: Daniel's, Ava's, and one I didn't recognize. From the window, I heard noises inside. My blood froze. They had keys. I had given them keys once out of trust, thinking that someday they might care for me the way I had always cared for them. I took a deep breath and opened the door. It was the first real confrontation of my new life. The sight before me is something I'll never forget. Daniel sat on the sofa, his head buried in his hands. Ava paced back and forth like a caged animal. A middle-aged man I didn't know was sitting at my dining table, going through my personal papers. "What exactly is going on here?" I asked, my voice so calm it surprised even me. The 3 of them turned to look at me, as if I were the intruder in my own home. Ava spoke first, her voice frantic, desperate, just like when she'd called earlier. "Patricia, thank goodness you're back. We need to talk. This is Mr. Richard Collins, from a family law office. We asked him to advise us on your situation." "My situation?" I repeated slowly. "I'm perfectly fine." Daniel finally lifted his head. The once innocent eyes of my little boy were now only wide with panic over money. "Mom, we just came from the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Charles even said you locked us out of the accounts. You did that. Why?" Mr. Collins, a man around 50 in a gray suit, wearing a practiced smile, came closer and extended his hand. "Mrs. Patricia, I'm Richard Collins, a family attorney. Your son and daughter-in-law are concerned about your mental state and asked me to assess the situation." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went straight to the dining table and gathered up every personal document he'd had the nerve to touch. "These are my private papers. You have no right to go through them without permission." "Mom," Daniel cut in with that condescending tone he'd perfected over the years. "We're worried about you. Your behavior lately has been very unusual. First, you cut off all financial support without explaining. Then you ignore our calls. We think you need professional help." Ava stepped closer, trying to take my hand with that fake gentleness she always used when she wanted something. "Patricia, we know. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, confusion can set in." The word confusion rang in my head like an alarm bell. Right then I understood why they had brought a lawyer. Not to help me, but to declare me mentally incompetent and seize control of my finances. The same woman who once said she only invited special people to her wedding was now treating me like a senile old woman. "I'm not confused," I answered, my voice so firm it silenced the room. "I am clearer than I have ever been, and you will all leave my house right now." Richard Collins, the lawyer they had dragged along, stepped in with his professional tone. Mrs. Patricia, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your son and daughter-in-law have the legal right to intervene if they believe your financial capacity is impaired. They've documented some concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? A harsh laugh escaped my throat. And who gave them the right to decide what I do with my money? Why can't I choose to stop supporting two grown adults who treat me like trash? Ava jumped as if I had slapped her across the face. We've never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will be ours eventually anyway. We're just speeding up the process. The naked truth. In their eyes, I was already gone. Nothing left but an inheritance to divide. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left. To them, I was just a walking bank account that had suddenly become inconvenient. Out, I said, pointing directly at the door. Daniel stood, his face twisted like a spoiled child not getting his way. Mom, we can't just walk away like this. We have responsibilities, rent, car payments, credit cards you co-signed. You can't just cut everything off like that. Can't I? For the first time, my voice rose. Who says I can't? For 36 months, I paid rent for a house that wasn't mine. I filled the fridge in a home where I was never welcome. I funded a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Collins pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. Mrs. Patricia, we've prepared a power of attorney to let Daniel and Ava manage your finances more effectively. Just temporarily, until you're feeling better. I picked up the folder and tossed it straight into the trash without even opening it. The only transfer happening here is you all transferring yourselves out the door. Ava began to cry, not from sadness, but from frustration and fury at being stopped. You can't do this to us, Patricia. We've built our plans around your support. We made purchases, financial commitments, because we trusted you'd be there. Commitments based on my money, I replied. Not on health, not on happiness, not on my presence, just on money. And when I decide to use that money to live for myself, suddenly I'm labeled a confused old woman who needs legal supervision. Daniel stepped closer, but I took a step back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms after a nightmare. He was a 30-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle standing between him and a life funded by others. Mom, we were wrong, he said, trying for an apologetic tone. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Ava was anxious. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just be reasonable again. Reasonable. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable meant continuing to fund them while I was excluded from their most important moments. It meant pretending it didn't hurt to be shut out by my only son. Mr. Collins gathered his papers, his voice cold and clinical. Mrs. Patricia, this is not over. Your family has legal options. If you are truly making irrational decisions due to mental issues, a judge could determine you need a guardian. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. This was not just family manipulation, it was a real legal threat. They wanted to take my freedom and my finances. Mr. Collins, I said, looking him square in the eye. Investigate thoroughly before you threaten a 62-year-old woman who has managed finances impeccably for 40 years, who raised a child alone after her husband died, who kept a home and worked until an honorable retirement, and who until last week was still financially supporting these two grown adults. Ava stopped crying. Her face went cold, revealing her true nature. This won't end well, Patricia. We have rights and lawyers too. Fine, I replied. Hire as many lawyers as you like, using your money, of course. My money is no longer funding childish lawsuits. The three of them headed for the door, carrying the wounded pride of people unused to hearing the word no. Before they left, Daniel turned back and looked at me one last time. Mom, this will end very badly for you. You'll be alone, with no one to care for you when you really need it. Daniel, I answered, my voice slow and icy. I have been alone for a long time. The difference now is that my loneliness is by my own choice, not because you abandoned me. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I'd heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, not from sadness or regret, but from the adrenaline of someone who had just reclaimed control of her life. I lay awake, planning my next moves like a general preparing for battle. If Daniel and Ava wanted a war, I would give them a war, but one fought with brains, not with emotions. Early the next morning, I dressed smartly and stepped out. My first stop was the office of attorney John Foster, whom I had met years ago when arranging my late husband's will. Unlike Richard Collins, whom Daniel and Ava had brought the day before, John has a reputation for integrity and for defending the rights of older adults. Mrs. Patricia, he said after I told him what had happened. What your son and daughter-in-law did yesterday is more common than you might think. Here in the United States, it's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. They're entering your home without permission and rifling through your personal papers is also an invasion. His words both reassured and alarmed me. Reassured because they confirmed I was not crazy, that what they had done was indeed abuse. Alarmed because it meant the situation was more serious than I had imagined. We need to document everything, John continued. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. When he saw the total, John whistled. More than $100,000 over 3 years. Mrs. Patricia, he said. With that amount you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you funded the entire lives of 2 adults who didn't even have the respect to invite you to their wedding. When I left John's office, I had a clear plan. Change all the locks in the house. Install a security system with cameras to protect against surprise visits. Open a new bank account at a different institution where Daniel and Ava have no connections. Most important, start living the life I've put off for so long. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Parker, had known me for years because I frequently bought supplies to fix up Daniel and Ava's apartment. This time was different. Mrs. Patricia, what is it this time? Another emergency at your son's place? Mr. Parker asked, his tone half familiar, half apologetic. No, Mr. Parker, this time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks and I want the best kind you've got. He looked at me in surprise but didn't ask further questions. While I was choosing locks, his son, Gabriel Parker, the one who installs security systems, walked in. It felt like fate. Gabriel, I said, I also need cameras installed. A full system. Price doesn't matter. As they arranged to come the next day, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Ava, using someone else's phone because I had blocked hers after yesterday's confrontation. Patricia, it's Ava. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Go ahead, I replied curtly. Listen, I know you're upset about the wedding. That was a mistake. Daniel and I talked and we want to make it up to you. How about we plan a special dinner to celebrate with you? We could do it at your house. Cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so obvious, I almost laughed. Ava, exactly how much rent are you behind on? The silence on the other end confirmed I'd hit the mark. 2 months. A total of $3,000. But that's not the only reason I called. Patricia, we really miss having you in our lives. Do you miss me or do you miss my money? I asked bluntly. Both, Ava admitted, in a rare moment of honesty. Yes, we need financial help. But we love you too. You matter to us. If I matter so much, I said, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why wasn't I important enough for a phone call that wasn't about money? When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing? Another long silence. We both knew the answer. Never. Ava, I'll make this clear once. For the last 3 years, you two have treated me like an emotional ATM. You've used me, ignored me, humiliated me, and finally insulted me in the worst way. And now, when the money's gone, suddenly, you love me. Patricia, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to attend the wedding. Now, I'm making mine, and I choose differently. I hung up and turned off my phone completely. I wasn't going to let them ruin my newfound freedom. That afternoon, I went to the hair salon, a place I hadn't set foot in for over a year. I had canceled appointment after appointment because Daniel or Ava had some emergency, or because the money I set aside for myself turned into their expense. Mrs. Patricia! Cindy, my favorite stylist, exclaimed. What a surprise! I thought you'd forgotten about us. I just forgot that I deserve care too. I went all in. Haircut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cindy worked on my hair, she chatted about her life, her kids, her dreams. It was such a relief to talk about something that had nothing to do with Daniel and Ava's demands. You look amazing, Mrs. Patricia, Cindy said when she was finished. But more than that, you look like you've broken free, like you're truly free. That's right, Cindy. I've finally learned how to say no. That afternoon, driving home, I saw a car parked in front of my house that I didn't recognize. My heart raced, thinking for a moment Daniel and Ava had returned with yet another lawyer. But as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps. Patricia? She asked as I stepped out of my car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Renee Wilson. I live right next door. We've been neighbors for years but never really talked. Yesterday I heard a lot of shouting from your house and I was worried. Are you all right? Her genuine concern touched me deeply. A stranger showed me more care than my own son ever had. Come in, Mrs. Renee. I'll make some coffee, and you'll hear a story you probably won't believe. While I prepared the coffee, I told her everything. Renee listened without interrupting, just nodding. When I finished, her eyes were misty. Mrs. Patricia, she said, you did the right thing. 5 years ago, I went through something similar with my daughter. I used to think it was my responsibility to support her whole adult life. I believed if I didn't give her money, she wouldn't love me. And what happened? I asked. I cut her off. At first it was awful. She threatened me, tried to make me feel guilty. But 6 months later, she called back and sincerely apologized. Now, we have a real relationship, based on love, not money. Her words gave me hope and confirmed I had made the right choice. Do you think Daniel and Ava will ever realize that? I asked. Now, your only responsibility is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying if Daniel and Ava had rent or food or enough for their luxuries. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, Gabriel Parker and his father, Mr. Parker, arrived at 8 a.m. to change all the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone rang non-stop from unknown numbers. Ava was still trying to reach me through different phones, but I had learned a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't matter. Mrs. Patricia, Gabriel said as he installed the cameras, this system will give you complete peace of mind. You can see who's at your house from your phone, even if you're not here. And if someone breaks in, the alarm will automatically alert the police. The irony didn't escape me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son. But now, it didn't sting the way it once did. It was simply a practical step to protect my newfound peace. While they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Call my sister, Bianca, who lived in California. We had drifted apart, because every time we spoke, all I did was talk about Daniel and Ava, how much money I'd given them, the false pride I felt in helping them. I realize now those conversations were nothing but financial reports dressed up as family updates. Patricia? Bianca sounded surprised when she answered. Oh my, how are you? It's been months since we last talked. I'm good, Bianca. Better than good. In fact, I'm calling to tell you that I've finally come to my senses. I told her everything. The secret wedding, the humiliation, the lawyer they brought to my house, and my decision to cut them off financially. Bianca listened in silence. When I finished, her response shocked me. Patricia, it's about time. Every time we talked, my heart ached when I heard you bragging about the money you gave Daniel and Ava, as if love could be measured in dollars. I always wanted to tell you this, but I didn't know how. What do you mean? I asked. That Daniel has never once spoken about you with affection at family gatherings. It was always, my mom paid for this. My mom bought that. But never, I miss my mom. Or, I love her so much. It's like you were a service, not a person. Her words stung like a wound being scrubbed, but it was the kind of pain that heals like when a doctor cleans an infection. You know what struck me most? Bianca continued. Ava always talked about you in the future tense. When Patricia is gone, we'll renovate her house. Or, when we inherit, we'll invest in business. As if they're just waiting for you to die before they can start living for real. That revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. I wasn't just seen as an ATM. I was a temporary obstacle between them and the money. While I tried to make them happy, they were planning a future without me. After hanging up with Bianca, I sat quietly in the kitchen, processing it all. 40 years of marriage to Robert, a husband who truly loved me. Over 25 years raising my son alone after being widowed. And 3 years funding 2 adults who saw me only as a walking wallet. The doorbell rang. Looking at the new security screen, I saw Renee, my elderly neighbor, standing there with a cup of coffee. I opened the door, and she handed me the warm mug. I thought you might want some company after what you shared yesterday, she said with the kind smile I had begun to treasure. We sat in the living room, and Renee shared more of her own story. My daughter said the exact same thing Ava told you. You're like a second mother to me. We're special to you. One day, everything will be ours. Those lines sound like they're learned from a book, I joked half seriously. Exactly, Renee said with a bitter laugh. Not officially, but it's like everyone reads from the same book. Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. If she resists, question her mental health. We laughed, but it was a hollow laugh. It was tragic to recognize how predictable this pattern of behavior was, even when it came from your own children. Renee, did you ever feel guilty when you cut them off? I asked. Every day for the first 3 months, she answered frankly. But then I started to see results. My daughter had to pick up a second job. Her husband stopped spending carelessly and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned I'm a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been postponing for years. Visit Robert's grave. I always found excuses not to go. Daniel or Ava needed something, or I thought the taxi fare should be saved for one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and green. Robert's grave was a bit neglected. It had been months since I last went. I sat on the grass by his headstone and spoke to him as if he were still alive. Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you were gone, I poured everything into Daniel. I wanted to make up for him growing up without a father. But along the way, I think I forgot who I was. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always that way, and I just didn't want to see it. And Ava, well, you know, the money you left for me to live comfortably, I spent it keeping them afloat. But not anymore, my love. I've learned. I cleaned up his grave, replaced the wilted flowers with fresh ones, and stayed another hour, just enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I didn't rush home to handle some Daniel or Ava crisis. When I drove back, I saw 3 cars parked in front of the house. My heart raced. But this time, I was prepared. The cameras showed Daniel, Ava, and 2 strangers. They looked agitated, pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called my lawyer, John Carter. John, they're at my house again. This time there are extra people. What should I do? Don't get out of the car, Patricia. I'm on my way and I'll call the police. After yesterday's conversation, I filed for a temporary restraining order. They are not allowed on your property. 15 minutes later, John arrived with 2 police vehicles. I watched officers speak to Daniel and Ava, saw my son gesturing angrily, saw Ava crying again. But this time, her tears didn't move me. One officer came to my car. You can come out safely. They'll have to leave right now. You can't call the police on your own child. Family doesn't threaten to have parents declared incompetent. I replied calmly. Family doesn't just enter someone's home without permission. Family doesn't treat their mother like an ATM. Ava shouted back from across the street. You'll have to pay us back everything you owe. We have obligations you co-signed. You can't just abandon us like this. John stepped in. Miss Ava, any further communication should go through my office. And I recommend you consult an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of every voluntary payment made over the past 3 years. I watched them drive away defeated, but not yet resigned. I knew this wasn't over. But for the first time, I felt confident. I had legal support, emotional backing from Renee, and most importantly, clarity about right and wrong. That evening, Renee invited me to her home for dinner. I met her daughter, who had come from Boston, and I saw with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. Respectful conversation, genuine concern, shared laughter. Her daughter never once asked for money the entire evening. That's what I want from Daniel, I confessed to Renee after her daughter left. And maybe one day you'll have it, she replied. But first he has to learn you're a person worthy of respect, not just a source of money. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The following days passed with an odd calm. The security cameras showed Daniel and Ava driving by the house several times, sometimes slowly, sometimes stopping for a few minutes, but they never got out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the right moment to make their next move. John had told me to document every time Daniel and Ava tried to approach, so I kept a detailed log with dates and times. Their persistence will actually work in our favor, John said. Every time they show up after being warned to stay away, it becomes more evidence to support a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, I was sitting down to a quiet breakfast when the doorbell rang. The camera showed a young woman, well-dressed, holding a briefcase with a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but everything about her said this wasn't a friendly visit. "Hello, Mrs. Patricia," she said when I opened the door. "I'm a social worker from the County Department of Elder Services. We received a report that you might be in a dangerous situation and need a wellness evaluation." My blood ran cold. Daniel and Ava had escalated things. It was no longer just their private lawyer, now they had dragged the government into it. "May I see your identification?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She handed me a badge that looked official. "My name is Clara Roberts, social worker. May I come inside to speak with you?" I let her in, knowing that if I refused, it could be used against me. Clara sat down in the living room and pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Patricia, we received reports that you made major changes in your financial behavior, cut off communication with your family, and showed signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We also heard that you refused medical and legal support from your relatives." Every word was carefully chosen to paint me as unstable. I recognized Ava's fingerprints all over it. She always knew how to twist language to get what she wanted. "Miss Clara," I said, summoning every ounce of composure I had, "I want to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's just a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, there's no problem talking with me." That phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," ignited my anger. That was exactly the kind of reasoning abusers use to justify intrusion. "I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or come back later, but I won't answer without legal representation." I called John, and he arrived 20 minutes later. When he walked in and saw the social worker, his face immediately hardened. "Miss Roberts," he said after checking her credentials, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is represented by counsel. Any unauthorized evaluation is harassment." "Sir," Clara replied, less confident now, "we received reports from family members who were concerned for her. It's our duty to investigate." "Family members?" John asked sharply. "The same family who tried to force her to sign over power of attorney without legal advice? The same family who broke into her home and rifled through her private documents? The same family who excluded her from major life events while living off her money?" John placed a thick folder on the table. "Here, I have full documentation of financial and emotional abuse against my client. Over $100,000 drained from her accounts in 3 years, accompanied by systematic exclusion and emotional manipulation. If anyone here needs to be investigated, it isn't my client." Clara flipped through the documents, her face growing more uneasy with each page. Clearly, what she had been told didn't match reality. "Mrs. Patricia?" she finally asked. "Can you explain why you cut off financial support to your son so suddenly? Because I realize they don't see me as a mother, they see me as a bank account. Because I'm tired of supporting people who treat me like a burden." "But don't you think it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question stung. "Miss Clara, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my child until 18, to give him an education and the skills to be independent. My son is 30 years old, married, fully capable of supporting himself. Funding his adult life is not my responsibility. It was my choice, and now I choose to stop." John cut in. "Miss Roberts, do you honestly think it's normal for a 30-year-old man to be unable to pay rent without his 62-year-old mother's support?" Clara sat in silence for a long moment. I could see her re-evaluating everything. "Mrs. Patricia," she finally asked, "do you manage your own finances?" "Completely. I can show bank statements, tax filings, investment plans. Everything is transparent. I live independently, maintain my home, care for my health, drive myself, and have healthy social relationships with neighbors." "Are you on any medications?" "Only vitamins and supplements. I don't have any medical condition that requires medication," John added. My client just completed a full medical evaluation as part of the legal proceedings. She's perfectly healthy, both physically and mentally. Clara closed the folder and sighed. Mrs. Patricia, based on this conversation and the records I've reviewed, I see no evidence that you're at risk or in need of intervention. I'll be closing this case. After she left, John and I sat in silence for a few minutes. Patricia, he said, this is definitely going to escalate. Daniel and Ava won't stop until they find another way to get your money. We need to prepare for the next step. That afternoon, thinking back on the meeting with the social worker, I realized something important. I no longer felt like a victim. I was a woman who had taken back control of her life and was ready to defend it. I called my sister Bianca to tell her everything. Patricia, she said after listening, do you know what impresses me most about this story? Not how terrible Daniel and Ava are, but how strong you've become. Her words touched me deeply. She was right. A month ago, just the arrival of a social worker at my door would have broken me. I would have second-guessed myself, maybe even gone back to supporting Daniel and Ava just to avoid trouble. But now, I was firm in my decision. That evening, Renee came by with a bottle of wine. Patricia, I want to celebrate with you. To celebrate that today, you fought off another attack on your freedom and won. Every time you stand firm, you grow stronger. We raised our glasses to new strength, a new life, and the freedom I had been waiting for all these years without realizing it. Renee, I said, after a sip, do you think I'll ever stop missing the Daniel of the past when he was still a little boy? Probably not, she admitted honestly. But you'll stop letting that nostalgia trap you in the image of who he used to be, and stop letting the man he is now keep hurting you. Her words carried profound wisdom. I could love the child he once was, but I would no longer allow the selfish adult he'd become to keep causing me pain. That night, I slept deeply, knowing that each day I was becoming stronger, more independent, more free. Daniel and Ava might keep trying to manipulate, blackmail, or threaten me, but they had lost their power over me. My new life was only just beginning. 2 weeks passed without a word from Daniel and Ava, and I began to believe maybe they had accepted reality. But on a Tuesday morning, while I was watering the garden, a strange car pulled up in front of my house. An older man in a suit and a young woman carrying a briefcase got out. My heart raced not from fear, but from anger. How many times were they going to try this? The man walked up to the door with a forced smile. Mrs. Patricia Miller, I'm Dr. Richard Simmons, a geriatric psychiatrist. This is my assistant, Dr. Kelly. Your family hired us to evaluate your mental state. I don't need a psychiatric evaluation, I said firmly from the yard, without moving closer. You're refusing assistance on your own property, he pressed. Your son is very worried, says you've had personality changes, unusual financial behavior, and signs of paranoia. A simple evaluation could clear up all those concerns. The woman added in a sweet tone. It's just a conversation, Mrs. Patricia. If you're as healthy as you say, the results will prove it, and your family will be reassured. I recognized the tactic immediately. It was the same line Ava always used. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. But I was no longer the naive woman I had been a month ago. Dr. Simmons, I said firmly. I'm 62 years old and I've managed my own life all along. I will not undergo a psychiatric evaluation just because my son doesn't like that I stopped funding him. Ma'am, we understand this resistance, Dr. Kelly said in a patronizing tone, as if soothing a child. But the evaluation is for your own good. For my own good? I laughed bitterly. Do you know what's actually for my own good? Not paying rent for 2 grown adults who treat me like garbage. Installing cameras to protect myself from relatives who once barged into my house without permission. Just then, John pulled up in his car. Seeing him, the two so-called doctors exchanged uneasy glances. "Dr. Simmons," John said as he got out, "I hope you have a court order to be here. Otherwise, you're in violation of the restraining order already issued against my client's family." Simmons shot back. "We're medical professionals, hired out of concern by her relatives. Hired by the very people who are legally barred from contacting my client," John replied coldly. "What you're doing is called indirect harassment, and it's still illegal." John called the police. "We need officers here immediately to remove 2 individuals from my client's home. They are violating a restraining order." While we waited, Dr. Simmons tried to justify himself. "Mrs. Patricia, your son gave us troubling evidence. Unpaid medical bills, stockpiled medications, erratic financial behavior." "Doctor," I cut. "Tim off. My son lied to you. I don't have unpaid medical bills because I'm not sick. I don't have stockpiled medication because I don't take any. And my financial behavior is perfectly reasonable. I simply stopped throwing money at the people who abuse me." "But ma'am," "Doctor," Kelly jumped in, "your family says you've threatened to cut them out of your inheritance, that you changed your will without consulting anyone." "Of course I changed it." My voice rose for the first time. "Why should I leave my estate to people who excluded me from the most important days of their lives? Why should I reward abuse with money?" When 2 police cars arrived, Officer Oliveira, already familiar with the situation, approached. "Doctors, I'm ordering you to leave immediately. Mrs. Patricia is under court protection." "Officer, we're medical professionals, not breaking the law." "Yes, you are," John interjected. "You're here acting on behalf of individuals under a restraining order. That's indirect harassment." "Dr. Simmons and Dr." Kelly muttered as they left. But before getting into the car, Kelly shouted back, "Mrs. Patricia, your family just wants to help. Don't let them isolate you from the people who love you. People who love me don't try to declare me incompetent to steal my money," I shouted in return. After they left, John and I sat in the living room to discuss our next steps. "Patricia," he said, "this is getting out of hand. Daniel and Ava are spending money they don't even have to hire people to declare you incompetent. That shows they're desperate. What else could they try? They might file for guardianship in court. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they find a lenient judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify for them, they could be appointed legal guardians." The thought made me shiver. They could take total control of my money. "But we have plenty of evidence that you are fully competent and that their motives are greed, not genuine concern," John reassured me. That afternoon, I called my sister Bianca to pour out my heart. "Sis," Bianca said after hearing everything, "do you realize how far they're willing to go just for money? They're sacrificing family ties, throwing money at lawyers and doctors, destroying their own dignity, all just to regain access to your bank account." Her words made me reflect. Daniel and Ava had revealed their true nature completely. There was no way back, no chance of real reconciliation. I had only ever been a walking wallet. That truth, though painful, brought me a sense of release. I no longer had to wonder if I was doing the right thing. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven that my happiness and health meant nothing compared to my money. That evening, Renee showed up with a surprise. She invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. "Patricia," she introduced. "These are my friends. Cindy, whom you met at the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Esther. We've all been through something similar, with family who took advantage." We spent the whole evening sharing life stories. Maria had to set firm boundaries with a brother who constantly borrowed money. Carmen cut ties with a daughter who only showed up when she needed cash. Esther once had to rewrite her will after realizing her grandchildren saw her as their retirement plan. "What hurts me most," I admitted, "isn't the money I gave, but realizing I never had the love I thought I did." "Patricia," Esther said, her 80 years of wisdom shining through. Real love can't be bought or sold. If you have to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were like balm on my soul. She was right. All this time I'd been buying attention, not love. I'd been funding an illusion. You know what I've realized? I said to my new friends. The loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than the loneliness of truly being alone. At least now, when I'm alone, I'm in good company. We all laughed and raised our glasses to this newfound wisdom. That night, after my friends left, I sat out on the porch in quiet reflection. The stars seemed brighter than ever. Or maybe it was just that I was finally seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely financially free. I no longer have anyone depending on me. No financial responsibilities beyond myself. And instead of fear, that fact moves me. I can travel if I want, renovate the house, buy nice clothes, donate to charities I care about, invest in my own future, instead of funding the present lives of ungrateful people. Freedom tastes like hope. And for the first time in years, I am eager to plan for the future. A month after that unwelcome psychiatrist visit, I thought I had finally won the battle. I had settled into a lovely routine. A slow breakfast with the paper, tending the garden, lunch with Renee or a few new friends, and afternoons spent on activities I'd abandoned. I'd returned to painting, the passion I had before becoming Daniel and Ava's personal finance manager. But one Thursday morning, while I was painting flowers on my new easel, John, my lawyer, came to the house with a grave look that chilled me. Patricia, we need to talk. Daniel and Ava have filed a petition asking the court to declare you incapacitated. They are asking the court to appoint a legal guardian for you. Those words landed on me like a boulder. I knew it could happen, but hearing it aloud made it painfully real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge finds you incapable of managing your finances? Yes, Daniel could be appointed your legal guardian and have full authority over your assets. I sank into a proud chair, feeling the deepest betrayal of my life. My own son was trying to have his mother declared incompetent just to steal her money. John, what evidence do they have? You've seen me, I'm perfectly lucid. They have testimony from 3 witnesses who claim to have seen you behaving oddly. They've submitted unpaid medical bills and medications they say you've stockpiled. They also have a report from Dr. Simmons claiming you refused to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, and they interpret that as evidence of deteriorating mental capacity. The scheme was diabolical. They'd turned my refusal to submit to an unreasonable exam into proof that I needed to be controlled. They used my instinct to protect myself against me. Who are the 3 witnesses? John flipped through the papers. Ava, of course. A neighbor named Mr. O'Connor. And someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Dr. Stevens. O'Connor is the man across the street, a cantankerous neighbor annoyed that my friends sometimes park near his house. And Dr. Stevens is indeed my pharmacist, but I couldn't see how he could testify against me. I need to see Dr. Stevens, I told John. Something's wrong. That afternoon, we went to the pharmacy together. Mrs. Patricia, good to see you. I heard you signed a letter saying I behave erratically with my medications. What is that about? His face went red. Mrs. Patricia, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago, saying she was worried you'd been acting strangely. I explained that you only occasionally buy vitamins or the occasional aspirin, no regular prescriptions. But she insisted that was proof you weren't taking care of your health. John jumped in. Dr. Stevens, did you sign any document? She gave me a form saying Mrs. Patricia has irregular medication purchasing habits. I thought it was for insurance or something. She gave me a form. I have difficultly considered and didn't realize it would be used in a court case. It turned out My own pharmacist had been tricked by Ava into signing a document he didn't fully understand. Ava's manipulation had no limits. Dr. Stevens, I said, I need you to write a clear statement explaining exactly what happened and affirming that I have no medication issues. Of course, Mrs. Patricia. I'm very sorry for the misunderstanding. After that, we went to see Mr. O'Connor. When we knocked, he answered with hostile impatience. What do you want? He growled. Mr. O'Connor, John said. I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. Yes, I did. She's crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. What specifically did you observe? John asked. Installing cameras like she's living in a war zone, having strangers coming and going, yelling in the street at her family. I realized Mr. O'Connor had completely misinterpreted everything. I'd installed cameras to protect myself. The strangers visiting were just my new friends. The yelling happened when I defended my home from Daniel and Ava's intrusions. Mr. O'Connor, I said, do you know why I installed cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my own son and daughter-in-law, who entered my home without permission and threatened me. That's exactly what a crazy person would say, he shot back bitterly. There was no point in arguing further. Mr. O'Connor's testimony was based only on shallow observation and malicious distortion. That night, John and I sat down to plan our defense. Patricia, he said, we need an independent psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Helen Carter, a specialist in capacity assessments. She can formally confirm that you are fully competent. But what if Daniel and Ava bribe the judge? What if none of this matters because they've already decided I'm incompetent? Patricia, the legal system isn't perfect, but it isn't completely rotten either. We have solid evidence of your competence and of their financial motives. We will fight. The next day, I met Dr. Carter. She was around 50, with kind but sharp eyes. Mrs. Patricia, she said. I'll ask a series of questions and run some tests to evaluate your mental capacity. Please relax and answer honestly. For 2 hours, she asked me about memory, reasoning skills, financial understanding, and emotional health. I completed tests in cognition, math, and logic. Mrs. Patricia, she said at the end, your results are far above average for your age. Not only are you fully competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this, based on what you've shared and the paperwork I've reviewed? This is a textbook case of elder financial abuse. Unfortunately, it happens more often than people realize. I left the evaluation both relieved and saddened. The professional confirmation reassured me, but it also proved the legal battle was real and unavoidable. That afternoon, Renee called an urgent meeting with our garden club friends. When I explained the guardianship petition, everyone was outraged. Patricia, Maria said, we'll testify for you. We've been with you for weeks, and everyone can see you're completely fine. More than fine, Carmen added. You're sharper and stronger than plenty of women in their 40s that I know. Esther, with the wisdom of her 80 years, held my hand. Patricia, my dear, what your son is doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents incompetent to seize their money, but you have something many victims don't: documentation, legal support, and friends willing to testify. Her words gave me hope. I wasn't alone. I had a team of strong women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? I asked. Daniel and Ava are willing to destroy any chance of reconciliation just for money. Even if I wanted to forgive what happened before, now there's no way back. Maybe that's for the best, Cynthia said. At least now you know exactly who they are and can act accordingly. That night, for the first time since the nightmare began, I truly cried. Not from sorrow, but from grief. I was burying, once and for all, the son I thought I had, the dream of a loving family, the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But at the same time, something new rose within me, a steely resolve that I would not let them steal not just my money, but my dignity and freedom. The war had officially begun, and I was ready to fight. The trial date arrived 3 weeks later. I woke early, dressed in my best black suit, and looked in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today wasn't just a hearing about my mental capacity. It was a trial of my dignity as a human being, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond a bank account. John arrived at 7 a.m. to review the strategy one last time. Patricia, remember the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove you're incompetent. We only need to show that you are not. But what if the judge is biased against me? Judge Carter has a reputation for fairness. I've reviewed his past cases. He doesn't automatically side with family. He cares about protecting the rights of older adults. We arrived at the courthouse at 9 a.m. In the hallway, I saw Daniel wearing a new suit surely bought for the occasion, and Ava dressed in black as if attending a funeral, perhaps the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Daniel looked away, but Ava stared straight at me with a coldness that confirmed this was a business deal for her. Their lawyer was an older, polished man, carrying the confident manner of someone who'd won similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, the strategy was clear. Paint me as a confused old woman, manipulated by outsiders to separate me from my loving family. Your Honor, he said in a solemn tone, Patricia Miller has shown a marked decline in mental capacity in recent months. She cut off all financial support to her family without reasonable cause. She installed an unnecessary security system out of paranoia and has isolated herself from relatives under the influence of neighbors and attorneys, exploiting her vulnerability. Every word in the opposing counsel's statement was chosen to turn my independence into a sign of confusion, my freedom into evidence of manipulation. Next, they called witnesses. Ava went first. Her performance deserved an Oscar. She cried as she described how I had completely changed, becoming hostile, paranoid, isolating myself from our loving family. Your Honor, she sobbed, Patricia has always been like a second mother to me. It is heartbreaking to see her mental decline. We only want her to receive the care she needs. The lies wrapped in tears looked convincing, but when John began his cross-examination, the cracks in her story rapidly appeared. Mrs. Ava, John asked, can you tell the court the last time you called my client without asking for money? Ava faltered. We always talk about many things. Can you give a specific date? I don't remember the exact date. But you and your husband surely had a wedding without inviting my client, didn't you? And when my client asked, you told her you had invited only special people, right? Ava flushed. Those words were taken out of context. What context would possibly make it appropriate to tell your mother-in-law she's not special? Ava couldn't provide a convincing answer. Daniel was next, seeing my son sit in the witness chair, swear to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental state, was one of the most painful moments of my life. The boy I'd raised alone, to whom I'd devoted my entire life. My mother has always been very generous with us, Daniel testified. But lately, she's become erratic, irrational. We believe she is being exploited by others. When John began his questioning, the mask fell away. Daniel, how much money have you received from your mother over the past 3 years? I don't know exactly. About $100,000. Does that sound right? Maybe. And how many times have you visited your mother that were not to ask for money? A heavy silence filled the room. Did you and your wife enter your mother's home without permission and go through her personal documents? We were worried about her. Did you bring a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We only wanted to help her manage her finances. You're 30 years old and still need your 62-year-old mother to help pay your rent? Daniel couldn't answer honorably. Mr. O'Connor, the neighbor, testified about my supposed unusual behavior, but when John pressed him for specifics, he admitted he had never spoken to me directly. His testimony was based only on superficial observation. Dr. Silvers, the psychiatrist they had hired, testified that my refusal to undergo an evaluation was evidence of cognitive decline, but John produced the independent assessment by Dr. Helen Carter, which completely contradicted that conclusion. Then, it was our turn. John called Dr. Stevens, my pharmacist, who explained how Ava had tricked him into signing documents that distorted my medication purchase patterns. Dr. Carter testified to my excellent mental state, presenting flawless cognitive test results. Mr. Carlson from the bank testified to my financial competence, confirming that canceling the automatic transfers was entirely reasonable and lawful. Renee and my friends from the garden club testified to my lucidity, renewed vitality, and ability to maintain healthy social relationships. At last, it was my turn. I stood, walked to the witness chair, with all the dignity I carried 62 years of experience, wisdom born of suffering, and strength forged through adversity. John guided me to tell the whole story. Over $100,000 spent in 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the invasion of privacy, the legal threats. Mrs. Patricia, John asked, why did you decide to cut off financial support to your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I received from them wasn't love. I replied firmly. It was just a transaction dressed up as family. My money was welcome. I was not. Do you regret that decision? I only regret not doing it sooner. Daniel's lawyer tried to rattle me, but I answered every question clearly. When he suggested my new friends were exploiting me, I explained that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on respect, not financial gain. In closing arguments, Daniel's lawyer kept insisting I was a victim being manipulated by outsiders. But John shattered that claim. This is a woman who finally found the strength to break free from years of financial and emotional abuse. The petitioners have offered no medical evidence of cognitive decline. What they've shown is only their frustration that their source of money chose to exercise her legal and rightful authority to protect her own assets. Judge Carter left the bench for 2 hours. 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his face was stern, but his voice clear. After reviewing all evidence, the court finds Mrs. Patricia Williams fully competent. Medical evaluations confirm her cognitive abilities. Her financial decisions, while painful to her family, are entirely reasonable and within her rights. Furthermore, the evidence indicates this petition stems more from financial motives than from genuine concern for Mrs. Williams's health. Therefore, the court denies the petition in full. I had won. Not just a case, but my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live unburdened by the abuse of those who should have loved me. As I left the courthouse, I saw Daniel and Ava arguing with their lawyer. Ava shot me a look of pure hatred before storming off. Daniel glanced back one last time, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw regret, but it was far too late. That evening, Renee hosted a celebration at my house with all our friends. We raised our glasses to justice, to freedom, and to the sisterhood of strong women who lift one another up. Patricia, Esther said, today you didn't just win a case, you reclaimed your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future belonged entirely to me. I could travel, love, create, live without fear, without shame, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold the house and moved into a lovely apartment near downtown. I donated half the money to organizations protecting seniors from family abuse. With the other half, I began living the life I'd always dreamed of. I traveled Europe, took painting classes, joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Daniel and Ava again. Through others, I learned they had to move into a smaller apartment, and Ava finally took a job for the first time in years. Perhaps hardship taught them what my blind generosity never could: the value of honest work and independence. Sometimes, when I gaze at the stars from my new balcony, I think of the woman I was a year ago, afraid, manipulated, convinced I had to buy love. That woman. In her place stands someone reborn, who finally understands a fundamental truth: true love can never be bought, and freedom is never too expensive. In the end, what I realized most is this: true love in a family is never measured in money or checks. It comes from respect, gratitude, and the small but genuine acts of care. Because once family ties become transactions, they will inevitably break. Maybe all of us have at some point tried to preserve a relationship by sacrificing ourselves, hoping that sacrifice would bring love. But the truth is, love never comes from purchase. It only exists when we set boundaries and love ourselves first. This story isn't just mine. It's a reminder that we, especially as parents, deserve to be loved for who we are, not for the money we give. And what about you? Have you ever faced a choice between affection and self-respect? If you were in my place, how would you handle it? I would truly love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments. And if today's story resonated with you, I invite you to stay with me for the next one: stories of family, of love, of life lessons we can all share and learn from together.